Back for another COVID cabal. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Just gonna make sure that everything here is getting shown correctly. I think everything's good. What's up? What's up, guys? What's up, guys? What's up, guys? When you're in, drop a comment in the chat. Drop a comment in the chat. When you're here, drop a comment in the chat. Hello, 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 hello. It's been a while. It's been a few weeks. It's been a few weeks. But you know what, guys? I just honestly have not had it in me to be pushing it too much. But I found the box in my pantry. Yeah, I'm sure it's there. I'm sure it's there somewhere. You know I'm not drinking, Jeff. Are you trying to tempt me with some of that box wine? It's not gonna work. It's not gonna work, Jeff. Let me see if we got a lot of stuff that we could cover, but I'm actually thinking about making it a shorter one, guys. I know it doesn't matter. You know that it always ends up going longer than I think, but I don't know. Well, I'll wait. I'll wait till some more people jump on in. Let's see. We'll get some more people on in here. Let's see. Evening, evening, evening. What's going on, Bob? How are you, sir? Wait till we get to 20. We'll start rolling once we get to 20, the magic number. 19. We're getting close. We're getting close. You you talking about me, or you talking about Nope, still out. No, 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 you're not. I didn't know you were in jail. Man, you gotta update me, Bob. I was wondering what happened to you. All right, peeps, we got the magic number here. So, a lot's been happening. I know you guys want more COVID cabals, but to be honest, I'm doing like the inner work right now. You guys are probably even in the dating capacity. You've seen I haven't put as much out there recently. A little bit more at these like last 2 days, but I've been going inward. I've been really giving up drinking, setting a new foundation for my life. Gave up caffeine. Um, really just trying to heal and shifting a lot of stuff around in my personal life as well. And I, you know, keep a pulse on kind of what's going on in the macro, but I just got to tell you guys, nothing can stop what's coming. So there is not, I like I want to keep the COVID Cabal community moving forward, but we, the big stuff this fall is imminent, and I'm honestly just trying to enjoy the summer and get ready. Uh, the big news, the big news that we have to cover. I think the two things are that we haven't talked about before. I'm not going to give much of a detailed update on this stuff. Ukraine war continues to plot around. By all accounts, the Ukrainian army is disintegrating. There was a Polish intelligence report that came out that pretty much indicated that they're losing a battalion a day. That's 600 men dead on average every single day, just getting pounded. And now it looks like there's a lot of coup intrigue that maybe Zelensky is going to get removed. And this is the theme of the. And thank you, Jeff, for that. Yeah, I'm gonna get there. I wanna heal up big time. It's funny though. Physically, getting rid of alcohol has helped with recovery, but sleep wise, it was caffeine that was messing me up. It wasn't, at least, I mean, maybe if I was still drinking and wasn't doing caffeine, sleep would be bad. But when I quit drinking but was still on caffeine, my sleep sucked. Like it still sucked. Or it's, let's just say it still wasn't to full rested. I've only started to feel like fully rested since I gave up caffeine. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But don't worry, I have no intention of being no fun. So we're gonna keep partying. I had a good time the other weekend with some friends. So I want to talk about the false awakening. That's the big thing I want to talk about here, because we're seeing the changing of the guard in a lot of countries. So we have Boris Johnson removed. We have Draghi in Italy. We have in France, not that Macron was removed, but we had the parliaments completely change against him. The parliament is basically majority anti-Macron. It's split between the socialists and the nationalists. And so, and now what's coming next down the line is probably going to be Germany and maybe Ukraine. We saw that Zelensky tried to fire the head of intelligence, who was his childhood friend, but then that didn't work. It's very interesting to see what's going on here. But the big one, of course, the big elephant in the room is Biden. And there's been just so much stuff talking about, recent chatter in the mainstream media about Biden, whether he can be able to, whether he's really fully there. Now we have him talking about the fact that he has cancer and now he's sick with COVID. Look, it's not certain. Biden has been, I think, a pretty good candidate for them because all the different factions essentially do what they want to do. They fight over what they can put in Biden's mouth, and they fight against each other behind the scenes where Biden just kind of sits there confused. But it seems like the use of Biden is starting to come to an end, and that they're going to get rid of him just like they've been getting rid of leaders in other countries. What the normies are probably going to fall for this. They're like, oh, they got rid of Biden, good stuff. And then, but the question is, who's next? Is it going to be Kamala, who everybody hates, or is it going to be Pelosi, who comes after Kamala? What is going to emerge in the aftermath of this? And I suppose the hope is that it's going to make a lot of the normie masses think that maybe things are changing, but they're not changing. They're not changing. It's the same power players behind the scene. And actually, from my assessment, things are going to get worse. Because the people who come after these clowns are more direct players. Not like, so you have individuals who control things behind the scenes, and then you have the clown in the forefront that everybody pays attention to. The clown is used. The clown's a puppet. It's not as dangerous. Boris Johnson, bit of a buffoon. Okay? It's these people behind the scenes who are really more psychopathic, and looks like it's going to be Liz Truss in the UK. I mean, by all accounts, a total idiot. I think things are going to get a lot worse because there's no reverse gear with these people. And I said it before, and I'm going to say it again. But I expect the war to escalate. And the only thing that I have to say that that's different than before is that we may now have a front in the war between Iran and Israel. So a 3-theater warfare. Israel, Iran, Europe, Russia, could be multiple fronts in that, and China, Taiwan. Let's see what else happens. Let's see what else pops up. And as much as I hate to say it, I can't seem to get this outcome out of my mind that they will escalate it to that point. So, U.S. carrier group gets sunk. What happens next? We got a really wild year ahead of me. Got a really, really wild year ahead of us. Let's see. About POTUS stepping down, Vice President Harris appointing California governor as VP, and then she steps down to avoid impeachment. It's it's very possible that Newsom could be in play for VP. The thing is, like, I don't know how they think this is going to be better. It just shows their level of desperation. Like, okay, the president that we all know, you know, fortified an election, has to step down because he's sick and demented. And so, in return for that, and you can't talk about that, by the way. And in return for that, we're going to get some totally random individual who nobody in the state likes, and we're going to make them vice president. I mean, it's just, I know a lot of people are really negative. They want things to happen. They think it's just going to be a slow decline. It's not going to get any better. But I am completely, you can see where the public doesn't have redress, but the public's pissed. And it's just going to keep, escalating like that. And we see the beginnings of the economic stuff, the economic storm brewing. I have a feeling that we're going to start to see the fireworks this fall. And this fall, winter is going to be the real pivotal period. Not that things aren't going to be exciting afterwards, but yeah. Another interesting thing, this is a little bit further back, we had CERN. And the whole idea of CERN is that they're trying to change the timeline. But the problem is that by trying to affect the timeline, they have to open up a portal to a future timeline. And if we're in the future, we may not help them to reach the timeline that they want here. So their attempts at CERN have been very interesting, but it seems like once they started to activate CERN, things got really crazy. It was like that was when Johnson stepped down. That was when Abe was killed. It almost felt like all it did was maybe accelerate some stuff. I don't know. It seems like a lot of things that maybe were supposed to be slow drip just happen really quickly. But yeah. So that's the main update, guys. I mean, what else? Drop some things in the chat. Maybe I'm probably forgetting a lot right now because like I said, I haven't been overly focused on it, and the situation continues to evolve across the board. But drop in the chat. What are some other things that you see going on? What are some questions you have? What do you want to go over? I'm mostly trying to fixate it on the false awakening. That's my big thing right now. I want to make sure people don't fall for the bullshit. They don't fall for the bait and switch. I did mention that Italy's government has also collapsed. Yeah, the prime minister resigned twice. He resigned the first time the president wouldn't let him, and then all the opposition parties refused to support him. So now he's resigned for good. Honestly, Draghi is the smartest one of the whole group. I think he wanted out. I think he saw the writing on the wall and was like, I gotta get out of here because I do not want to eat this shit. Yes, Elon backs off Twitter deal. So the Twitter thing's very interesting, and the question is this, 20D chess on Elon's side to make Twitter have to reveal all of its bots, and then, by revealing all the bots that Elon will buy Twitter at a lower price? Is this just a way to destroy Twitter? And this is actually an argument, which is that, well, because people don't understand, well, why was Twitter so opposed to Elon buying it, but now they want him to buy it? Why would they want to do that? That suggests that they want to collapse social media themselves, because maybe social media is becoming too hard to control, Twitter in particular. Maybe Twitter is too difficult of a platform to control. And so it's better to destroy it, which would be great for my business if you destroy Twitter. But we'll see. We'll see how this whole thing plays out. Still fairly neutral on Elon Musk. tempted to believe that he's working for the light right now, but you're a fool if you take that for granted. Got to just keep an open mind with all this stuff. Um, we have all this stuff with Trump coming back and being the savior. There's still people who believe that. There's still people who believe in the savior complex. People got to drop the savior complex. Nobody's coming to save us. There are white hats, and they are assisting us, and they do want to help us, right, with this whole thing. But they're not saving us. People are like, sit back, enjoy the show, eat some popcorn. It's like, go fuck yourself. It's really about galvanizing the population to action. That's what it's about. And honestly, guys, I've completed my tour of duty. I got my Purple Heart. um, I'm waiting for the masses at this point. Everybody's seen it. I don't have to go into it in too much detail, but everybody's seen the jabbed, especially the multiple jabbed, the boosted up. They're getting sick. They're getting really, really sick. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this on a past show, but now we're looking at in multiple Western countries a 10 to 15% overall drop in fertility over the past year. So, you know, uh, if we have a bad strain of the virus this fall and winter, and I think we're going to have a cold winter, then God help us. God help us. It's it stops being funny, at a certain point. It stops being like, haha, told you so. Um, it's going to be a lot of chaos and a lot of sadness, actually. It's going to be very tragic. So that's going to be happening. The new Q drops, I don't take those new Q drops seriously. I think that they're fake. Personally, I think they're fake. I heard some people trying to like assess the IP address, but I don't buy them. I don't buy them. I don't think that they've added anything new. It just seems like a way that they would take our um, take our focus. Secret Service agent dump. I don't know much about that. I just heard that the Secret Service texts were deleted. That's all I heard. What is the end goal of CERN? Also, when they turned it on again, like recently, how can you spot that it's turned on, or how can you tell it's on? Can you feel it? So, the intention of CERN is to try to change the timeline. So, the idea, if we're gonna, propose a premise here, if you accept that we're at the end times, which is the planetary ascension period, what happens is that all the timelines begin to converge to a single point. It's a singularity of sorts. Um, and so you can see how all these things have been hijacked to mean, oh, the singularity is when AI is, now controls everything. There's two competing singularities. They've tried to tell us the singularity is the AI one, whereas the singularity is really more of like a timeline completion. The end of this period, basically. This period can't continue. And everybody's felt that. You know, they've just been trying to seed their own end of history. Fukuyama's the end of history, right? Um, it's not true in the way that they mean it. But we are done with this class, so to speak. A lot of us are just here chilling. I mean, we're not chilling. We're going through stuff, but we're taking the final exam, but a lot of us are prepped to pass it. Some people aren't going to pass it. Some people have actually already failed it. And they're going to get a bad grade at the end of it. So, CERN is trying to change that outcome. And from how I understand it, the more that they've, in order to try to change the timeline, they've been trying to view a different timeline that would involve them not losing. But by viewing future timelines, they've only been accelerating it because all the timelines reveal the same thing. Sort of the paradox that if you like, I'm gonna take a guess here. It's kind of like Schrodinger's cat, that because, or maybe the better example is the particle versus wave experiment. They're all talking about the same thing, which is the quantum nature. But if it's observed, then it happens. So by constantly trying to observe the future so they can plan around it, they keep manifesting the future. I've actually heard some spiritual teachers mention that they have caused their own demise because by viewing the future of us winning, they created it. You get down a real rabbit hole with that stuff. Can you feel it? If you're attuned to it, you can feel it. But I also don't think that you should feel like bad if you didn't feel it. Um, things were just very different afterwards, I would say. And I was joking actually. I was actually joking with some friends that um, they turn on the certain timeline and I'm not drinking anymore. Like, oh wait a minute, was that a different timeline? Was that was the old timeline of me? I was still drinking, a parallel universe, but because of CERN, now Pat Stedman's no longer drinking. Is that what happened? I don't know. Um, if so, it's definitely a more positive timeline. Iraq is about to switch to an asset-backed currency. They are the catalyst for something like 20 currencies of SWIFT. Then SWIFT will go away. I know that I've been hearing a lot about the Iraqi dinar stuff. I have some reservations about it. I've heard some scammy stuff going on with that with Charlie Ward, and that always makes me a little bit hesitant at this point in time. But there's no question that the big game is the BRICS and asset-backed currencies versus the West, the dollar, which is I printed it and I have carriers. I said so. I control. It's basically financial system control versus economic system control. Because Russia, China, the BRICS control the industrial output and raw materials, but the West and Europe, America and Europe control financial institutions. And so it's kind of like hardware versus software. The issue is that in the end, the hardware is going to win because you can always, it might be inconvenient, but you can always write new software on top of the hardware, but you can't write new hardware on top of the software. If there's only a certain amount of hardware, whoever controls the hardware can ultimately program the software. So the West is doomed to fail, but in the meantime, they have a tactical advantage and a strategic disadvantage. But of course, they're squandering their tactical advantage because rather than they understand they had a tenuous strategic position and use their financial leverage wisely, they're just basically trying to cause everybody short-term pain and say, hey, here's why you can't do it, but they end up just, shooting themselves in the face. That's another thing. The government will destroy Twitter if Elon buys it. And I'm sure Elon, if he wasn't aware before, is aware of that now. Is Trump the Antichrist, though? I don't think so. We've talked about this before. There's certainly a lot of symbolism around Trump. There's no question about that. But I haven't been convinced by the Antichrist stuff. To be honest, I feel like this is a conversation, just a table. Keep it on our minds and let's just see what happens down the road because, let's see what happens down the road. We have so much more to go before we'd have to worry about that kind of stuff. But I expect more of like a tech guru. Like I would say Elon is a better candidate for the Antichrist than Trump, right? Because Trump's hated by too many people. The Antichrist is not supposed to be... they're supposed to make him into someone who creates all these wonders and anyway, I've seen the Gematrian symbolism, so I get it. We'll find out. Red wave or blue wave in November doesn't matter. It is going to be a red wave in spirit, and then we'll see the fraud. I mean, California's already doing mass mandates. Guys, they're gonna steal it. I mean, is it going to be more mail-in ballots? I think that the outcome... This is a good topic. I mean, I think the outcome of the midterms is a livid population because you're going to see some states really just totally break the voting laws. So you'll see in some states actually fair elections. Like I think maybe Florida will get to the bottom of it. Because remember, in the last election, everyone's like, "Oh, look at how red Florida went." Florida went even redder. Florida was blood red. I was hearing that 6 points were stolen from Florida, from Republicans. It's a few more House seats. So, I think you're going to see a lot of red states get redder and blue states get stolen. And they're going to use that, first off, to mitigate losses in Congress. But also, let's go back to the fact that they know they cannot control the United States in full. The United States is a country they could not fully capture, and they know that. You can capture UK, you can capture Canada, you can capture the other countries more or less in full. The opposition's tiny, and they're not armed. But the United States, you have a huge opposition, way too much territory, armed population. They've always known they can't take over the United States in full. The structure of the United States is designed too much to stymie them. So their agenda is not to destroy the United States themselves. Their agenda is to provoke the United States into a civil war. If they can manufacture perception of an irreconcilable division in the United States, which is what they were trying to do with January 6th, if they can start a civil war, then America can destroy itself. And I very much ascribe to this position. I think it's completely correct. And I can see with their strategy right now, they know they can't deal with Florida, but that's okay. They don't need to deal with Florida. They actually, in some ways, maybe Florida's beneficial to them on a certain level because, obviously they love to control the whole thing, but if they can make it into a blue-red thing and, DeSantis and Florida are super red and California, New York are super blue, it's kind of convenient. You have like the four biggest states in the country, two big blue ones, two big red ones. And this is the whole thing, right? That you can create this polarization. And so the issue is that how do you get to a civil war at this point? Well, this was an issue with the 2020 election, which is the whole point of that big lawsuit with the Supreme Court. You have states that complained, hey, if their voting is fraudulent, that disenfranchises us because we all vote together for president. So if they don't conduct their elections like in an accurate or fair way, it is a civil rights violation of our state's rights to, select a president. It's going to be the same issue again this fall because you're supposed to have a massive red wave, but maybe instead of having, 70, 80 seats flip, you have like 30 seats flip because you should have like California going completely red or whatever, and it's not because it's all being stolen. And so what that does is then you start to have states, red states say, well, we don't consider the federal government to be legitimate. And hey, maybe the 2020 election wasn't, and now the midterms, Congress, then they're going to say Congress isn't. And so what happens when you have a bunch of states that start to say, we don't think that this federal government has accurate, is being led by elected people? Well, that's when you have secession, the beginning of secession. Now it starts off with soft secession, which is what you're seeing now, which is kind of like nullification. And if you guys know your history, you know that nullification in South Carolina was one of the things that led to the Civil War, is that the states, southern states started to base, in South Carolina in particular, would start to basically say that we are nullifying this decision from the federal government because we don't agree with it. And we're a state and we have more sovereignty than the federal government. And so it becomes a sovereignty question. So people were like, is it going to go into full collapse? There's not going to be any structure of authority. No, it's the states that are going to be this. this is the devolution plan, actually, which is that you do have states that are going to still maintain control in their areas. And so this is what we start to see happen is we're going to start to see states just basically ignore federal diktats. And the Republican convention, Texas Republican Party convention, just a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, they voted on a resolution to consider secession for Texas. So I mean that's like an early, okay, it's got ways to go with that, but that's like, yeah, I mean that is a big deal because it shows it's already, people are already thinking about it. Now, will it go to full on secession? I don't know. It could be that you end up having all the states by the end of this secede from the federal government. Um, and I think I can see that domino effect happen because you have a few states that are captured, but then the people in those states riot about it. Because now it's like every other state isn't following it, but they have to follow the crazy people. I think it ends up with Washington basically isolated and then waging a terror war against its own citizens. And maybe that's when the military steps in. You know, people like Juan are saying the military will step in to prevent civil war. I honestly, maybe. I don't know. I mean, the military's pretty hollowed out. So we're talking about ballistic missile commands. Okay, maybe. Maybe that there'll be some special forces that'll come in and do things. But um, anyway, that's not going to happen for a bit now, guys. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening until early as next spring. We got a lot more pain ahead of us. We just got to buckle up. We got to get that pain in. But yeah, I start to see this soft secession movement occur. And, you know, what if Texas decides to mobilize the National Guard to block the border? Well, the federal government says you can't do that, and then what happens? So the Texas National Guard is responsible to the governor. And so what is the president going to do? There's going to be a lot of excitement going on in the States. I can tell you that much. Bricks admitted that she and Fauci were wrong on Zero Hedge. Of course, it wasn't publicized mainstream, though. We'll see what happens. All right, let's see here. How long has CERN been around? Did it exist in 2001 for 9/11? I don't think it's been around that long. But it was started up after 9/11. I think it was like 2004. Don't quote me on that. Jeff, I seriously hope that that's the case. I hope that's the case for sure. Seriously, I hope it is. Isn't most of our, yeah, exactly. So what if they start dropping? It's a good question. I do think that we're going to, I mean, there's been a lot of stuff coming out about within the military having to, how do I put it? Within the military, there have been, they've been trying to hide data about the increased risk of injuries and deaths in the military service. So, domestic collapse in West when the dollar dominance falls. Yep, 100%. People don't understand how dependent we are on everybody in the world wanting to buy our dollars. And this is a good example of the bullshit with the GDP. So, some of you guys are aware of this, but one of the big arguments about why the West could deal with Russia no problem is because Russia has a tiny GDP. It's got the GDP smaller than Italy. It's got a GDP smaller than Texas. So, you know, Russia's, why should anybody be afraid of Russia? Well, because GDP is a bullshit metric. It's bullshit. GDP is like based on how many people want to buy crap at Target. You know, it's there's so much of it that's based on consumer spending. And so you have these Western countries that have really high GDP, which is based on their consumer purchasing and their debt, which is considered, you know, part of the economic growth engine. So it's basically how much crap do they buy and what sort of stupid service jobs do they have. It's not do they produce real things. That's only a small fraction of GDP. So it's a bad metric. I heard someone describe it, I think, on Twitter, which is that you have to look at economies like a Soviet planner would to actually assess their strength. And if you look at it like that, Russia and the US are more or less even par in terms of their economic power. Um, I think Russia, depending on that category, is slightly behind the US, but we're talking about slightly behind the US, and China is like orders of magnitude more powerful than the US. So you start to get an idea of just how clown world works, clown world analysis. But I mean, it's funny, like, wouldn't have necessarily broken down GDP, but you just know intuitively a country that has high amounts of natural resource extraction, domestic industry, is going to be, especially in the military domain, is going to be more resilient than a country that isn't. It's very interesting to me. Is China collapsing? Um, China's mortgage crisis is coming home to roost, and that's another reason I think we can expect war in the fall, because as the whole economic system starts to go as we get in the fall, China is going to need a reason to distract the public, and Taiwan's a good reason. So there's a lot of things that come together. October's the invasion season with the C's, and the economy is going to be coming there. It's right before the midterms. We'll see how it plays out. But I just would be shocked if we have a global de-escalation, because the psychic energy of the country, of the planet, has not exhausted itself. Like, you can kind of see, you can almost start to like understand what it was like during World War II, and just the kind of hysteria and insanity that you could see countries possessed by. And you realize that things won't change until that fever breaks. Like, that's why I'm very short-term bearish, because I look at the psyche of not only Western leaders, but the Western public. And while we got a lot of awake people, we're still just not there yet. And until these individuals who are in power, until they're removed, there's no reason that they would back down. It's my perspective. There's no reason they would back down. There needs to be some kind of, there's like a karmic repercussion that's coming for Western countries. And we're going to see it happen soon enough. They want to make the SDR the world currency, digital SDR. See, I think it's funny, AOC was provoked into saying publicly that J6 was an inside job with the big booty Latina club. Oh my God. Soft secession equals parallel economy. Exactly, Jeff. Exactly, Jeff. I really need to read up on the Civil War. Yep. Increasing escalations. But the difference here is that the public is far more on the same page than before. We're not quite there yet, but I do think we are getting there. I think we're getting there. Devalue the dollar to pay the $30 trillion debt. Man, they might do anything. I mean, they might make that platinum coin, and all the debts are. Honestly, I wouldn't. If we moved to a gold backed system and we had a debt jubilee, I wouldn't even care. I wouldn't care. I mean, obviously it would suck. There'd be a lot of problems with that, but I wouldn't care. Got to restart things up, one way or another. Let's see here. Yeah, exactly. Powered Cliven strategy, break the economies with debt. All right, let's keep going. White Hat's using fake Biden to unite the country against globalists, possibly. What do you think about Republicans voting against contraception bill? I don't really pay attention to the contraception bill kind of stuff. I think it's like political theater. It just doesn't matter. The more I see produced by Congress, I actually see nothing. Like, this is really interesting. when the government gets to a certain level of bloat, its laws are all in opposition to each other on a certain level. And so basically nothing really starts to happen anymore. It's like there's too many laws, too many regulations. So I don't even know exactly what the contraceptive bill was about. I heard a little bit about it. We know it's not going to stop anybody from actually getting access to contraception. Um, so, or like, I just don't really think it's a big deal in the end. White hats using a fake Biden to unite the country against globalists, possibly. I don't. I understand why people think this, but the way I would put it is that this is a misconception of 5D and 3D. So from the 5D perspective, is good using evil against it? Yes, in the same way that a judo master like Putin uses its opponent's energy against them. There's a lot of people who think maybe Putin's with the bad guys because what he's doing is crashing the Western economies. But again, using their energy against them doesn't mean that he's on the same team as them. It's the same kind of thing with Biden. I don't. It wouldn't make sense energetically for good people to kill and harm at their own public. If these are the white hats, I don't want anything to fucking do with them. Honestly, I don't want anything to do with white hats who say, yeah, we're going to steal the election against our own guy and install a Manchurian candidate pedophile who then goes and, kills, pushes Ukraine into a war where 50, 100,000 plus people die and maybe gets us into World War III to wake people up. That's not what's going on. They may understand what the dark side's doing and they may not act now because they understand that the dark side's moves, that there's a point where they can use that against them decisively, right? Like someone throws a punch and when they throw a punch, if you can grab their arm in the right way, you can break their arm. It's the same deal. So I see the white hats are using the black hats' attacks against them, but they're not, just because that's what they're using. Again, they're using the dark sides against them. It doesn't mean that they are the dark side. They're doing these evil things. My perception. Let's see. Elon is a scam artist fraudster used by in-the-know senators to line their pockets with early source backing whose funds were squeezed the stock into the stratosphere. I mean, I can't disagree with that. We all know that Elon's company is built on subsidies for climate change. That said, look, I keep all this stuff in my mind, but I'm only thinking right now, like, what's the battle in front of us? We sort out the rest later on as we go. Elon wants to come forward as the new leader. Well, let's bring some of that scrutiny in. But right now, look, if he's going to shoot at the same people I'm shooting at, I'm not going to shoot him. You know what I mean? And that's a metaphor for all the feds watching. It's a metaphorical statement. It's like we're on the same side, right? For the moment, I'm not going to go against him. I'm not going to attack him. We mentioned the guide stones getting blown up. Yeah, they got blown up. That was one of the things that happened after CERN. Very interesting. Very interesting. They just wanted to update their guide stones. It's a new update. No, I heard that was a white hat move. And it might have been like oh, you tried to mess with CERN. It didn't work out so well for you, did it? I think that the white hats, if we're talking ballistic missile command, I'm going to go back to the Stargate stuff. If we're talking ballistic missile command, which by the way is huge because that means we're not getting into World War III. Even if we lose a carrier group, we're not getting into World War III. But we're not getting into a nuclear war is what I mean. We'll be in World War III, but we won't be in a nuclear war. But if we have ballistic missile command, which is Space Force, what sort of programs are in Space Force? I think about this, and I think about the movie Stargate and the kind of stuff that they were doing in the series, and it makes me just think about, what sort of timeline related stuff that they know about, what kind of higher level extraterrestrial help that they know about. And, it's very interesting when you think in Stargate about how the U.S. and China, the U.S. and Russia were the two countries across the world who were really working together on the stuff with the Stargates. The other countries were kind of along for the ride with that. I don't like when I look at the American white hats and when I look at Putin, it's hard not to see some sort of level of extraterrestrial guidance. Um, just in terms of the positioning and stuff. I don't see that with China. I don't see that with any other Western countries. So we'll see. Maybe there is some sort of cooperation at that highest level, but yeah, this is a good. White House may have flipped Elon recently to look super based and wake up normies, and this kind of goes into the whole thing with space. Do Elon and what's his face Bezos with their little private space programs, are they keyed in to what's going on? Because they've both been very outspoken against Biden. So something's happening. Well, yeah, the Ukraine numbers are garbage, but if you just run, I mean, as of a week ago, pretty credible numbers were we were looking at 50,000 Ukrainian dead, 30,000 injured without being able to return to combat. So basically, like, too fucked up to fight anymore, missing limbs and stuff like that, and 20,000 captured. So that was about a week or so ago. And if you're losing on average 600 dead a day, that's it's ramping up really fast. And I don't think a lot of people understand that Ukraine right now is using, first off, they're doing mass conscription of any men they can find, and now they're even doing it with women. And they're using barrier troops. So what they have is they have what's left of their professional army kept in place for very, very specific operations. And then they have their conscript army, which is basically just sent to hold lines, which basically means get shelled over and over and over again. What the Russians do is they'll shell the positions and they get 60% casualties in the battalion. And that's basically, in a battalion, that's essentially the entire fighting force, because you have auxiliaries and everything like that. And the Ukrainians don't put their commanders on the front lines, like NATO. NATO won't put their officers on the front lines. Russia does. And so you have all these conscripts who are put there. They basically suffer 100% combat casualty rate. And so they have to rotate the unit. And then during the rotation of the unit, the Russians move in. And that's why they've been taking positions relatively easily. The Russians are losing very, very few people now, compared to the beginning of the war, when Ukraine actually had artillery and stuff. Now these HIMARS and whatnot are just used to basically take out strategic targets or civilian stuff, really used to escalate the conflict. They're going to just probably attack Kursk or Belgrade and try to provoke Russia into war, all-out war. But point here is that in order to keep these conscripts on the line, they have barrier troops, which is basically like, if you remember from Enemy at the Gates, when they had the NKVD, the communists, the communist secret police, who had the machine gun behind the cannon fodder. When the man with the rifle gets killed, the next man picks up the rifle and shoots. Like, it's that kind of deal. If you retreat, you'll get shot at. And there have been some reports that Ukrainians have fired on their own soldiers for trying to retreat. So 100,000 casualties right now. And going up. I think by the end of this war, you will see six-figure minimum Ukrainian dead. Could get really bad. I think the meme stock phenomenon is part of waking people up to market corruption. The market will crash, and that will force transition out of fiat dollar. I agree with that. Yeah, there's been some indications about some of these Bidens being people, not clones. People get like all the clone stuff, just face mask stuff, like in Mission Impossible. It's weird. Elon's brother had used Epstein to find a girlfriend. No, it's not a good look. And then his dad, right? His dad has knocked up his stepdaughter twice. So he raised that girl from when she was like 4 years old and then knocked her up twice. So he's like 75 and she's like 35. Pretty very, very interesting. Let's see. Market makers and banks are the only entities allowed to counterfeit for profit. If we can't stop that activity, we will continue down this path. 100%. You can't control the if you can't control the money, it's all over. Um, all those prime ministers resigning may be really good or really bad, maybe running to bunkers. I don't think it's either. It was expected. They need to try to find a way to manufacture consent again. Oh, you didn't like this guy? Well, here's a new guy who does the same thing worse, but he's new. You know, it's like a lot of these marketing campaigns. Like, you have a product that sucked, and then it's new and improved, and it works worse than before. But they do a makeover so people maybe buy it once to check it out. So it buys them a few more months. But then the anger gets even more acute because then the trust goes down further and further, and then they can't put anybody up there that will satisfy the masses. That's where it goes. I also find it interesting that Russia and China are both speaking out about American biolabs. China is self-serving, but Russia seems legit. 100%. Do you think the army is faking weakness to encourage China and Russia to start World War III? I think the army is weak. What happened with the vax and these woke policies can be only described as the equivalent of Stalin's purge of the Red Army. They're pushing out every single conservative from the military that they possibly can. And I know multiple people personally who were either pushed out directly or indirectly. They were either pushed out, said you got to go, or they were basically made to feel like this is not going to be a place you want to be in. So it's a purge. And now, of course, they can't recruit people because who would want to serve an army that, you know, who would want to work for these people? So we have serious problems in the army right now, serious problems in the military, not only just from a supplying standpoint. You know, another thing, just to talk about the weapons themselves. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to say that the United States doesn't have good weapon systems, but a lot of our weapon systems are very like good on paper. Like it can, you know, do this and this and this and this and this. It's got all these features, but it has, as a result, it has poor reliability. So what that means is that in theory it's supposed to work and do all this stuff, but in practice the system is too complicated and it breaks. Just breaks. It can't do anything. So reliability is pretty important. I mean, you could have a tank that has like all these sensors and there's all this kind of stuff. And I'm just using an example. I don't have any real world examples of American tanks having problems. But if you go through all this stuff, you end up getting to a point where it's like, can the artillery fire repeatedly over and over again, or is it going to jam up? Is the anti-tank missile going to not fire? Is it going to be a dud? You know, these are things that matter a lot in war. And that's why even, you know, the Russians have been bringing out a lot of these old Soviet weapons now just to increase their firepower, because a Tochka-U ballistic missile maybe isn't like an Iskander or a Caliber missile in terms of its precision, but it's an effective weapon. It's got high reliability. So why not, you know, you can use it. you can use it. Maybe it's a little less accurate, but you can use it over and over again. Is it better to have something that's a little less accurate, that's reusable, rather than something that won't work? That's the problem with a lot of American weapons, and that's part of the military-industrial complex bloat, because we pay all this money for this new cool toy that we don't actually have to really use in combat and test it in the field. We don't do rigorous field testing like the Russians do. So I am extremely concerned about NATO's army. And honestly, the big issue here is that the U.S. won't even fight a ground war in Europe. The big bloody nose that we'll get will be with our carriers. Europe is going to pay the price on the ground, not America, because at that point, there's no way that America will be able to deploy significant numbers of soldiers to Europe before there's a full-on revolution in the States. I think they may be using Ukraine to shed light on Pelosi, Biden, and carry past corruption. We keep saying the money while we waste it here. Yeah, or they just keep doing it themselves. So they keep sending it over because they're desperate to keep the whole thing going, to keep the whole thing hidden. So anyway, guys, that's it. It's kind of more of a Q&A today. A lot's happening. A lot is happening. Let's not feels like we're in the doldrums, but I do think this is an opportunity for us. Let's get our ducks in a row. We're heading into the fall. We're heading into the storm, maybe. We said this before, but well, I think it's coming pretty soon now. So once the economy really tanks, I mean, we're just getting ready for it. Everybody's preparing themselves more and more and more for what's coming. Again, to use the World War II analogy, you could start to see this stuff happening in 1936, 1937, 1938, 1939. You could feel the tension build. And then eventually there's war. And then it's like, okay, it's not that bad of a war, though. And then there's the invasion of France. And then there's the invasion of the Soviet Union. And then there's the attack on Pearl Harbor. And you just see the events stack and stack and stack. And so you thought that, the Germans invaded Poland, this is a big deal. Like, that's where we're at right now with Russia and Ukraine. There is a lot more coming down the pipeline, so gird yourself. We've talked about how to prepare. You keep yourself prepared. And I love you guys. I'll see you soon.